are here tonight for Brains Collide, the very first Melbourne Bright Club show. What's going to happen tonight, a little bit later on, is we're going to have 6 bright, mostly young neuroscientists come up here, and they are going to present to you 8 minutes of comedy. Our first act is a virologist and a neuroscientist. Please welcome to the stage Dave Hawkes.
Thank you, Ben, for the intro. Yes, my name is Dave Hawkes. If I was going formal, I could call myself Dr. David Hawkes. I don't, because I'm not generally a wanker. I'm a doctor for the reason that probably quite a fair percentage of this audience is as well. I have a PhD. It's quite good. You get to do a few different things. My GP looks at me, sees doctor, bulk bills me as a professional courtesy. I get to use the phrase, trust me, I'm a doctor. And apparently, if you put doctor on your title when you take a plane flight, you can actually get upgraded. This is not something I'll ever get to know because my wife refuses to allow me to do it. It's not for the reason that a lot of you who gave me a little chuckle are thinking. They're not sort of imagining we're sitting there having our peanuts, looking at the movie and hearing this. Ladies and gentlemen, if there's any doctors on board, could you please make yourself known to the cabin crew? And they'll have a look through, and I obviously wouldn't say anything, but they might look at the manifest and come over and go, excuse me, Dr. Hawkes, we have a patient in business class, because it would be business class, who's got a medical condition. We were hoping you'll help. Now, a lot of you would be thinking my wife would be a little embarrassed if I kind of go, yeah, I'm not that kind of doctor. I'm a virologist, I'm a neuroscientist. I teach med students, but no, and I could blush, but obviously I'm doing stand-up as a scientist, so I'm not really that well embarrassed. What she's worried about is the fact that if this conversation goes this way, excuse me, Dr. Hawkes, we've got a person in business class who's having a medical emergency. Could you come in? Why not? I go up there and be going, I need a serrated knife and a big pen. This man needs a tracheotomy. I've watched a lot of Scrubs and a lot of MacGyver. I can do this. So that's why I don't get to use the phrase doctor on the plane.
Cracking on to our next performer. She is a paediatric neurologist who works at the Royal Children's Hospital. We're very lucky to have her here performing for you tonight. Please welcome Monique Ryan.
Hello. Yes, my name is Monique Ryan and I am a child neurologist. I may not look like a child. But that's part of my magic. Actually, when I was very little, I wanted to be a plastic surgeon, but my powers of transubstantiation haven't quite progressed that far. I've never quite worked out how it is that plastic surgeons manage to look so real. When I was asked to come along tonight, they asked us to talk about the theme of neuroscience and how we happen to be neuroscientists and to try and make that funny. I couldn't work out how to do that, and I asked my husband, and he said, well, you could start by saying something like, 2 neuroscientists walk into a bar. And I said, okay, and then what happens? And he said, nothing funny. The thing is, it would never happen. I said, because 2 neuroscientists would never walk into a bar. I actually thought it was a bit unfortunate that this session starts at 6 o'clock, because if you're like me, normally at 6 o'clock you're still at work and still you're, at that point, pretty much only half pissed, and I didn't think you'd be ready for it tonight. No, they asked us to talk about our journey and how it is that we came to be here tonight as neuroscientists. I drove. Actually, I started off, I started doing all this in the 1980s, and I grew up in Melbourne and I went to Melbourne University. Some of you may have heard of it. At that point in the 80s, what we generally did was dressed in black and wore bright lipstick and stood around trying to be funny and cool. I've grown up a lot and moved on since then.
All right, we're going to crack on with our third performer tonight. She is a radiographer and a PhD student. Please welcome to the stage, Farquharson.
Okay, so one thing about radiography is I've said it's quite sociable. We're not very well appreciated against in the other healthcare professions, but what we do is choose to support ourselves. In London, we have the Radiography Academy Awards. Woo! And you can win an award each week for the best patient, the best X-ray, and the best object. And this was for a young, strapping Aussie guy, about so tall, but he was lying down, I couldn't tell. I guess those things. Anyway, he came in, lying down on the trolley, shirt off, always a bonus, and he just had like this previous history of abdominal pain. Well, I looked at him, he looked like he was in a lot of pain. It wasn't the history of abdominal pain, and didn't really say anything else. So I didn't bother him, I just, took his X-ray, as you do. As you do. And it wasn't until later that I realised that he must have been in quite a lot of pain, because he'd been at the Royal London Hospital for 22 hours in Emerge, which is quite normal over there in Britain. And I picked out the X-ray out of the developer, popped it up in Emerge for everybody to see, to realise that this young man had a budgie up his bottom. True story, dear God. But the funny side was that I didn't know till I got to Australia and I'd moved here that when Tony Abbott was talking about budgie smugglers, he wasn't talking about that.
Mr. Jerry Marr.
All right, good evening, everybody. How are we doing? Good, yeah. All right, so my name's Jerry, as Ben has already said, and I work on multiple sclerosis, or MS, as you might know it. So I don't know if anyone used to do the MS readathon when they were young. Anyone in the audience? Yeah, all right, great. So just quickly, for those of you that haven't done it, it's a reading-based fundraiser run by MS Australia to raise money for MS research and to support people with MS. Basically, you try to read as many books as you can during a period of time, and then you get people to kind of pledge to donate money for the amount of books that you've read. So I was a huge nerd back in school, not anymore though. But for some reason my friends do keep asking me to audition for Beauty and the Geek. I don't know why. So being the huge nerd that I was, used to do the MS readathon all the time. And when I did it, I used to cheat a little bit. So I used to read maybe 1 or 2 real books, and then I'd read like a lot of children's books and picture books. So now I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking, Jerry, why not just not read any books at all and just say that you did? Well, I'm still a human being and I still have a conscience. So. And plus, my Asian parents needed to know that I was reading. And, being Asian, they didn't know the titles were titles of children's books. So, pretty ingenious plan. Little did I know that I'd end up doing my PhD in MS research. So I thought, I think now that some of that money that I raised back then is probably going towards my research. And sometimes I slack off a bit in the lab. I take too many tea breaks, or I take too much time writing a set for a comedy thing. And I feel a little bit guilty. I feel a little bit guilty about, raising that money. But then there are times where I'm, being super productive, really getting a lot done. What's that? My supervisors aren't here. I don't need to say that. Okay, that's fine. I'm getting a lot done. This does happen. Ask my friends. I'm sure they'll tell you. So when this does happen, I feel like, awesome past Jerry. That was really awesome work, raising all of that dirty picture book money.
Yes, our next act is also a PhD student. She's also studying neuroscience, but a particular area of neuroscience that I think many of you will find particularly fascinating. Please welcome to the stage, Lizzie Manning.
So I bet you guys want to hear what I do now. I'm interested in studying the effects of methamphetamine on the brain. So you might know that better as speed, ice, crystal meth. Think Ben Cousins' drug scandals, bikie gangs, Breaking Bad. Pretty cool, yeah? That's not really what I'm doing in my PhD. I'm interested in what happens in the brains of crystal meth users that causes some of them to develop psychosis and schizophrenia. So I guess that's a bit less cool. I'm probably losing your attention now, but if you're anything like the teenagers I talk to in the high school visits or people my own age that I meet outside of research, there is one question that you're just dying to ask me about my research. Now, this is the number one first and often the only question that people want to ask me about my work. So can any of you guys in the audience guess what it is that people have to ask me about working with crystal meth? Have I tried it? No. Where do I get it? Yes. They all just want to know where I get it from. So I don't know what this says about you or other people of my generation. Maybe people think I'm going Walter White on the side and I run the biggest crystal meth production lab this side of Mexico, and that my PhD project is just a front for this scam. I don't know, maybe people just want me to get them some. Maybe that is the case. But when I do, I don't know what they're hoping to hear when they do ask that question. But when I do explain that chemical companies make illicit drugs like crystal meth for us to use in research and that we can only buy it because our institute has a special license, and every time I use the drugs there has to be a witness there and we have to log everything down, you can see that the glamour of the project rapidly fades away and they pretty much lose total interest in my PhD. Hopefully my assessors don't do that as well. So the next sticky topic is what I do with the crystal meth. So no, I'm not looking for any volunteers, but thank you. Because I give crystal meth to mice. Mice on ice. Pretty catchy, yeah?
Postdoc, he works in epilepsy imaging. Please welcome to the stage our final performer for tonight, Chris Tailby.
So we're back at this house party. And we've been there for a while, we've all had a few beers and we're starting to get a bit bored. And so Jihaj says, I've heard about this other party, you know, why don't we go along there? And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea, let's go. So we start trundling out towards the car, and on the way out the door I say, hey guys, I'm going to have a traveller, does anyone else want one? Neil's head snaps around. See? Thinking my accent's at trouble again, I say, I'm going to have a traveller. What the hell? You never had a traveller? And then Neil turns to me and he goes, are you sick? Of course I've had a traveller. But A, I've only ever had one on my own. B, I've only ever had one in my own car. And C, I most definitely have never offered one to anyone else. So by this stage, it's clear to me that I've once again walked into this minefield of cultural misunderstanding. So I attempt to clarify. I'm gonna have a beer for the road, a traveller. And at this, Neil breaks into this kind of sheepish grin and the others start laughing. So I realise that Neil has probably just confessed to something very embarrassing. So I say, Neil, what were you talking about? And he goes, well, a traveller, it's, you know, you're on a long road trip somewhere, you're driving along, you're getting kind of bored, you know, you're having trouble staying awake, you've got to do something to stay alert. And he goes, well, you know, you just kind of unzip and whip it out and start working off. So on that note, I'm going to go and have a beer.